spokesperson of SCOAN is Mr. Bali Chwane. A very good morning to you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, ma'am.
Mr. Chwane, we did speak to your colleague, Mr. Kirsten Matandani, about a number of factors I'd actually like to pick up from what he and I couldn't discuss. Speaking about the events that unfolded since the 12th of September, there were a number of delays to getting information out. Our president only released the news to the South African public. On the 16th, there were allegations that SCOAN was hampering some of the investigations, that they were not forthcoming with information and perhaps jeopardized the lives of those who could have survived the tragedy. What do you say to all of this?
Let me begin by, of course, passing condolences to the families and greet everybody in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. To be very specific to the allegation that the church tried to hide something, there is no substance to that. Immediately after the tragedy, the church made contact with the Red Cross, which is an international organization, to come and assist. Immediately thereafter, the church also contacted 11 construction companies, some of them are multinationals, to come and assist with the rescue operations. Contact was made with the local rescue operating, which are agencies of government. So immediately after that, the church made sure that, of primary importance was to save lives. So there was no scheme at all, as has been alleged, to try to hide anything from the members of the public. And let me just analyze the issue of the church tried to prevent people. By the way, at the inquest last week in Lagos, the Commissioner of Police for Lagos State said the following: when we arrived on site, and they arrived before NIMA and LASEMA, which are the two government agencies who made these allegations that the church prevented them from coming in, the commissioner said, we were on site. It was important to control the crowd so that, the rescue operators can be able to operate, because that incident attracted a multitude of people. Some, of course, with good intentions, others just curiosity, others, of course, with bad intentions. So the police say, we were in charge. So we had to control the entry and exit of rescuers on site. So there was no indication that there was no, there was any prevention for anyone to assist.
We're looking at live visuals, at least we were a moment or two ago, from outside the Waterkloof Air Force Base. My colleague Griselda Lewis is standing by there. We have seen a number of officials already arriving as we await the repatriation of those 74 people who died in the collapse, out of over 80 who totally perished from South Africa. We do know that we're expecting a Minister in the Presidency, Jeff Radebe. You can see planes landing in and out of the Waterkloof Air Force Base there. We will continue to bring you the very latest from the ground. We know that Social Development Minister Bathabile Dlamini is there already. Health Minister Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi has already arrived there, speaking to us very significantly about the fact that his people on the ground were making sure that there's no disease transfer when it comes to the logistics of repatriating the bodies there. As I mentioned, Griselda Lewis live at the Waterkloof Air Force Base. We will continue our discussion with Mr. Bali Chwane, speaking to us on behalf of SCOAN. But right now, let's quickly check in with Griselda to find out what has changed in the last 10 minutes or so. Griselda, who else has arrived and what's happening on the ground?
Well, thank you very much once again, Ayanda. Well, the second plane has just touched down here at the Waterkloof Air Force Base. We're expecting the repatriation team that assisted in getting these 74 bodies here to South Africa today, which are expected to land at about 9:45. We're expecting them to disembark from that plane any minute now. Certainly, they will have their own tales to tell about how difficult it has been for them to bring these South African bodies back home. And we're expecting quite an emotional day here at the Waterkloof Air Force Base, where the relatives of these victims of the building collapse certainly will feel the pain, but of course the excitement and the hope again, once again, some closure to a certain degree there, Ayanda, that their loved ones are now back home thanks to the South African government, and certainly they'll be able to lay their loved ones to rest. Certainly, in terms of culture, Ayanda, families within a week already are able to bury their families, but they've had to wait for just over 2 months for that to happen. Certainly very painful experiences for these families. But the man who has been at the center of all of this, of course, appointed by President Jacob Zuma to facilitate this process, the special envoy to Nigeria on the repatriation process, as well as the minister in the presidency, Jeff Radebe, joins me now. Minister, thank you very much for your time. I'm sure you're quite exhausted this morning. It's been a number of days, the facilitation of the repatriation. Finally, 74 of those bodies are coming home this morning.
Indeed, it's very traumatic, especially for the families, especially for those 11 who we could not repatriate yesterday. But President Zuma has made a commitment that we need to make sure that we leave no stone unturned, that all 85 must be brought back home. But that's dependent on the Nigerian authorities that are responsible for all these DNA samples. We're going to be cooperating with them to ensure that eventually those 85 are brought back when it is humanly and scientifically possible.
I see the numbers were confirmed quite late last night, Minister, about exactly how many people will be repatriated today. What happens now for the remainder in Nigeria? Of course, the identification process will continue, but do we have more staff on the ground there to ensure that does happen soon?
Indeed, as you know, this happened in the state of Lagos, and the Nigerian authorities in the state of Lagos, they've contracted a forensic company in Stellenbosch. So they are the ones that have to confirm whenever they get a match when they do these samples. So that's why this process is so time consuming. But we have committed ourselves that whenever our assistance is required, because we have experts as well within the South African Police Service Forensic Laboratory that can be able to reinforce in order to ensure that we bring closer to this whole episode that has happened to the people of South Africa.
Was one of the stumbling blocks, Minister, relating to Nigerian laws, for example, that of course the South African government needed to abide by those before those bodies can be repatriated? We were speaking to the Health Minister a bit earlier on, who mentioned that as one of the stumbling blocks.
Yes, indeed. That's why the President appointed me as a special envoy. When I arrived there, we met with His Excellency President Jonathan, who pledged his full support, and indeed he introduced us as well to the Minister of Health from the federal state, from the federal government of Nigeria. Then we also met the governor of the state of Lagos, the commissioner for health, the chief pathologist, all the people who take decisions. We have to meet them in order to ensure that we speed up this process so that we can be able to repatriate all those South Africans.
But there have been many questions that we raised, Minister, about why it took so long. You've alluded to some of those, but in Nigeria, in your talks that you've been having with the Nigerian government, what has been the stumbling block here? It's been 2 months. You've mentioned in the press conferences earlier that, of course, in South Africa, in a week, we've buried our loved ones. And what explanation is there planned to give to these families who feel that this should not have taken so long?
Let's cast our eyes back on the tragic day of the 12th of September. All of us saw that video clip when that building collapsed. So you can imagine that first and foremost, there has to be a rescue mission by the Nigerian authorities in order to get to the deceased and to the injured. That took a long time. And also the climatic conditions of Nigeria as well. That's why we have being advised by our medical experts to the families that in our view, families should be very cautious in viewing the bodies, because medical officers, they know what happened on that day. So we are really pleading that let's have this process as dignified as possible so that we can really bring closure. But what we can be certain about is that all those 74 that are coming here, they've been positively identified to be South Africans.
Minister, of course, the 74 are coming back today, but, what are relations like between South Africa and Nigeria? Is there any strain on the relationship pertaining to what has happened? Yes, there were laws that needed to be abided to, and much speculation that there might be some bad blood due to all these delays.
Not at all. Actually, South Africa and Nigeria, they have excellent relationship, and that relationship doesn't start now in 2014. During the struggle against the system of apartheid, Nigeria was at the forefront in supporting our country. South Africa had in defeating the system of apartheid. Every Nigerian had even to contribute financially to that struggle. Now that both countries are free, and Nigeria being the biggest economy in Africa and South Africa being the big one in the southern tip of the African continent, we have a binational commission that reflects the strong relationship that exists between our two countries. There are many South African companies that operate in Nigeria: MTN, Stanbic, ShopRite, you name them, more than 100. And also there are many Nigerian companies that do business in our country. For an example, Dangote Cement. Mr. Dangote is the single biggest foreign investor in our country today, who's building a multi-billion rand cement factory in Lichtenberg in Northwest. So what we need to ensure is now to expand these relations, especially economic relations, so that we can take this continent into the next level of economic growth and job creation, especially for the youth of this nation.
Minister, you also visited the site of the building collapse. Let me get your personal view. What was it like for you visiting, seeing all that devastation and destruction?
That was a deadly blow to me. I cast my eyes again and I feel for the families of the deceased to see that rubble, that those who survived, I think they must thank their lucky stars indeed. What I saw there is beyond words.
Minister, now what happens next? Is there any indication about the remainder of the bodies who are still in Nigeria, when perhaps they might be repatriated as well?
The process has not ended. Even when we left, the laboratory in Cape Town, in Stellenbosch, is still processing the DNA samples. As soon as we get confirmation, we'll be able to inform the families of the 11 remaining South Africans.
Minister in the Presidency, Jeff Radebe, thank you very much for your time there, sir. Certainly many South Africans will say a job well done there, that finally these 74 bodies, not all of them of course returning to South Africa today, but the Minister in the Presidency certainly saying there that work does continue in Nigeria, and of course as soon as that identification process has been complete, those bodies will also return to South Africa. Let's take a short break here on Morning Live. We'll be back with you straight after this.